continue from where Amir left off. Uh, so let me start off by describing what a very generic roadmap will be for all the lower bounds that we'll present. And the first lecture would be on some very, very easy lower bounds, but just to get used to the method. And the next lecture will be a little more involved, but I'll be more hand wavy. But if you want to see the details, it's there in the surveys. But as Amir described, all these lower bound proofs will work with some progress measure or a complexity measure. This is just some function mu that assigns a number to every polynomial. And intuitively, this number is supposed to describe how hard or how easy the polynomial is. So the smaller the number, you sort of intuitively want to say, okay, this is an easy polynomial. And as Amir described, it's very useful when mu is subadditive. And depending on what model you're trying to prove lower bounds, you try to engineer mu in such a way that mu of a building block is small. And then with some reasonable amount of sweat and blood, you show that mu of some explicit polynomial some explicit polynomial is large. Subadditive, yes. Yeah. So this is going to be the typical roadmap, and this is a natural proof strategy. And so these three statements together will mean that for this explicit polynomial, you need many building blocks to compute it. And that's going to be the lower bound. Now, here is a mu that will always work. So let's say mu of f is equal to size of the smallest circuit computing f. This is a complexity measure, this is subadditive, and if the building blocks are small circuits, yes, mu of the building block is small. And this question you're not asking any new question, you're asking the same question. It just says that if the smallest circuit computing f plus g has size at most the smallest circuit for f plus smallest circuit of g. Let's say you throw in one more. I'll give it to you for free. So, yeah.
Since we're usually dealing with families of polynomials, but mu gives us a natural number, how do we handle, for example, computing the determinant of the n by n compared to like n minus 1 by n minus 1?
So what you would be comparing is for the n by n determinant, this number would be something, and for an explicit polynomial for all building blocks that involve polynomials over n variables, you will say that this number is small. I'll give you a few examples, and this will be, yeah. So therefore, this is not really helping. And so you want to work with a complexity measure which is in some sense useful, in the sense that it's something that you can play around with and you can argue about explicitly. And almost all lower bound proofs that we know of in arithmetic circuits, it involves this pattern. And to start off with, I'll give some very, very simple examples of these lower bounds. For very simple circuits, most of it were things that Ankit discussed in yesterday's lecture. And just to say a little more, so more like a spoiler alert. So mu of f is typically a rank of some big matrix. Let me just call this MF. So MF will turn out to be some matrix where every entry of this matrix will be some linear function, some linear function in the coefficients of my polynomial f. So you should think of each row as you're looking at some linear operator that you apply on f, and you're looking at some rank of this matrix. Now, because every function is a linear, every coefficient is a linear linear function over coefficients, you get subadditivity for free. So when you have two polynomials f plus g, then you know that the coefficient vectors are additive, and the rank of a sum of two matrices is at most the sum of the ranks. So you get subadditivity for free. And the real part would be to try and construct these linear operators in such a way that for the building blocks that you're interested in, the matrix will have very small rank for those building blocks. And typically what you do is, just as a sanity check, you just try and heuristically estimate how good do you expect this to be for, say, a random polynomial. If you get that value to be much, much larger than what you have for the building blocks, then you know you're on a good track. Okay, now this is something that might lead to a lower bound, and then you work hard to do this for an explicit polynomial. Okay, so this is a typical natural proof strategy.
You don't mean natural proof in the technical.
In some sense, I mean, the pun was intended. I mean, the sense that this, for most of the examples that we are looking for, this matrix would be very explicit, in the sense that given a polynomial as a list of coefficients, you would be able to write down what this matrix is. So in some sense, in the Rasburov-Rudich sense, it's constructive. You can figure out what mu is. It's large in the sense that for random polynomials, you will expect this value to be large. And it's useful in the sense that it's going to separate your circuit model from something. So that was the pun in this. Yeah. Okay, so
The reason why the natural proof value doesn't apply here is because we don't know how to construct pseudo-random generators.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah. So the natural proofs barrier in the Boolean world, so typically, I mean, the reason natural proofs barriers exist is because we know explicit constructions of pseudo-random generators from hard functions, from hard Boolean functions, from one-way functions and so on. And we don't know of an analog here yet.
But I thought there is some result by Landsberg, Diffremenko, etc., which shows that this technique can't give
Which technique?
the partial derivatives technique.
Oh yeah, no. Right now, the rows here could be any arbitrary operators. I mean, if they're partial derivatives and so on. Yeah. So here this is a very, very vague statement that I'm making, where I'm going to build some matrix where every entry is some linear function of the coefficients, and I'm going to prove it. So let's start with a model that. Okay, I'm experimenting something with the boats. Let's see if it works out. So let's start with a model that came up a lot in Ankit's lecture yesterday, which is the model of depth 3 powering circuits. So just to recall, what are these circuits? These are circuits that computes polynomials of the following form. So in terms of the circuit, it looks like there is a plus gate, and then there are, as Ankit called, these powering gates, and there's another plus gate. So these guys are variables here, so this computes a linear polynomial L, and it gets powered to some L to the E, or rather let me put it Li, and then you're going to add up a few of them. So you compute something that looks like I to the, let me just call this Di. So these are expressions of the form these are polynomials that can be expressed as a small sums of powers of linear polynomials. And just to recall, yesterday Ankit showed that xn, this can be written as something like 1 over n factorial times s is a subset of n minus 1 to the n minus kernel ts summation xj jns whole power n. So this was one of the things that we saw yesterday. So this is an example of writing a monomial in this form, where the summation is of size 2 power n. Now in general, you could ask, okay, can I prove a lower bound? Is this expression tight? I mean, is this the best that I can do? And so let's try to prove lower bounds for such circuits. Okay. So we are going to do we are going to try and engineer such a mu, some complexity measure. And the building blocks here, you get it right from the expression. The building blocks are going to be a single power of a linear polynomial.
You also allow constant factors to multiply these powers?
Yeah. So whenever I write a sum here, I just mean some linear combination. Multiplication by constants are always for free. Yeah. Right. So yeah. Okay. So now let's try to prove lower bounds for such circuits. So what do I want to do? I want to construct a measure such that mu of L to the D, where L is some linear polynomial, this is small. This is what I want to do. I want to build a matrix such that the matrix has small rank whenever I am working with L to the D. And so for this one, what we need to do is we need to look at the building blocks that we have and somehow exploit some weaknesses of these building blocks.
When you say something is small, you mean with respect to mu of L?
With respect to how, okay, so here is what I want. The matrix is going, depending on the dimensions of this matrix, I want the rank to be substantially smaller than the dimensions. And the reason is because I would expect an explicit polynomial, I would expect this matrix to be more or less full rank. And I just want a gap between what it is for these building blocks and what it is for a very generic matrix. So here is a fairly simple observation, which is that any kth order partial derivative of L to the D is basically some alpha times L to the D minus K. You're doing chain rule, and every time you apply chain rule, one constant is going to come out. You add them all together, you'll get some field element. So in other words, this is saying or. So I'll use this notation to imply, take the set of all kth order partial derivatives. So there are something like n choose k, n plus k choose k partial derivatives that you could take the collection of polynomials and look at the dimension of all those guys. Okay, so the dimension of all partial derivatives of order k of L to the D, where degree of m equals k. I'm looking at all possible kth order partial derivatives. Sorry, this is this set. So this says that the dimension of del k of L to the D, this is at most 1. Right, because it's spanned by just one guy, which is L to the D minus k. So great. So therefore, this is what the matrix is going to be. You build this matrix where the rows are indexed by partial derivatives of order k. And think of each row as you're taking the partial derivative of the polynomial with respect to that monomial m, and just list out the coefficients. So every time you take a partial derivative, you'll get some polynomial, just list down all the coefficients. So in some sense, so if this guy was m prime, this entry is the coefficient of m prime in the partial derivative with respect to m. Okay, so this guy is going to be coefficient of m prime in del m of f. You know what I mean by this. Okay, so this is going to be my matrix. Did I write m sub f? Yeah, okay. So this is going to be the matrix mf here. Okay, so this observation implies that for f equals L to the D, rank of m sub f is at most 1, which implies that if f equals summation I going from 1 through 1 through s of Li to the Di, then rank of m sub f is at most s. Yeah, it's at most s. Okay, but for a generic polynomial, the dimensions of this matrix are like it has n choose k rows and something like typically way more columns. I mean, like, or at least the number of rows and the number of columns are exponential. So you would expect for a random polynomial this to be full rank. And indeed it is. Let's just take, what is this matrix going to be for this polynomial? Let's just take the monomial and see what the matrix is going to be. Experiment. Okay. So the partial derivative with respect to some monomial m of x1 through xn is nothing but x1 through xn divided by m. So therefore this matrix for multilinear. So I'm going to take partial derivatives only with respect to multilinear monomials because I want this to be non-zero. So if the characteristic vector of m is some set S, then this one entry will be 1 and the rest will be zeros precisely for t equals S complement. So this in some sense is it's a permutation matrix. So therefore it's going to be full rank. Right? I mean, so if I choose k to be equal to n over 2, then this is going to be a permutation matrix, and this says that mu of x1 through xn for k equals n over 2, this is like n choose n over 2, which is like 2 to the n. So it's like 2 to the n over root n or something. And that says that if I want to write x1 through xn as an expression of that sort, the number of summons I need is at least 2 to the n over square root n. So that's an explicit lower bound, and it more or less says that what Ankit wrote yesterday was tight. Okay? So, yeah, so this was a fairly easy expression. Okay, so now just to point out, it's not all, okay, so this was a particularly easy case in the sense that the measure mu was such that for the circuit model of interest, mu was really small in the sense that it was polynomially related to the size of this, to the size of the circuit. But for the polynomial that you were interested in, it was exponential. But often what happens is that even for the circuit model of your interest, it will still grow exponentially, but much smaller than what you expect for a very generic case. So let me give you one example where something like that happens. Okay, so this is QED for that theorem. Okay, now let's look at, let's make the model a little more general and look at what are called homogeneous depth 3 circuits, or homogeneous sigma pi sigma circuits. So what are these? I'm computing a polynomial f of over n variables and degree d. And I want to write this as a depth 3 circuit. What are depth 3 circuits? Are expressions of the form I going from 1 through say S, and I have Li1 through Lid. This is what I mean by homogeneous in the sense that if you're computing a degree d polynomial, I'm expecting each of these Li's to be linear forms. There are no constant terms. In which case, if you're computing a degree d polynomial, there's no point in having products of degree more than d because they just have to get cancelled. So you have expressions of this sort. And I want to prove lower bounds here for an explicit polynomial. Now obviously x1 through xn is not going to work because you could choose the thing, but I still want to do that, and in fact the same measure just works. So this was an observation of Nissan and Wigderson. Actually, I shouldn't call it Nissan and Wigderson, where they said let's look at the kth order partial derivative of any L1 through Lk. So let's look at this. Sorry, L1 through Ld. What can I say about these? So if I look at the first order partial derivative of this, chain rule will tell me that I have to differentiate L1, leave the rest the same, plus differentiate L2, leave the rest the same, and so on. So it means it's a linear combination of terms which are subsets of them of size d minus 1. Now just repeating this further, this will just mean that this is spanned by L sub s, where S is something of size d minus k, and this is just shorthand for product of Li where I is in S. Sorry? Sorry. Yeah. So it's contained in the span of these guys. Right? So this means that the dimension of all kth order partial derivatives of L1 through LD L1 through LD, this is at most d choose d minus k. Right? Okay. So let's set some parameters. Let's set this to be something like d over 2. So this is like d choose d over 2, which is like 2 power d over square root d. Something like that. Now, is this good or is this bad? So now, let's take one explicit polynomial and see what happens here, and we'll take the polynomial to be the determinant, as Nissan and Wigderson did. Okay, let this be there. Know what is, so because I'm interested in a degree d polynomial, I should be looking at the d cross d determinant, which has d squared variables but has degree d. So I want to look at what is k of det d. Now any partial derivative of the determinant with respect to say the variable x11 is just the minor where you remove the first row and the first column. Right, so the kth order partial derivative just means that, I mean, if you better take k guys from distinct rows and distinct columns, then it would mean that you remove those k rows and k columns and look at the determinant of the resulting submatrix. So, and in particular, the monomials in these, if you choose two different minors, the set of monomials that you induce here are completely different. So in particular, they are linearly independent. So this means that the dimension of del equals k of det d, in fact this is exactly equal to d choose k the whole squared, because I need to choose k guys from distinct rows and k guys from distinct columns. And we were looking at the setting when this guy was something like d by 2, and this is like 2 power 2d over something like 2 power 2d, right? So this says that, okay, for the circuit model that I'm interested in, that
But you can do the choice of these k rows and k columns and k factorial rows. You eliminate the k factorial.
right. But the
So it's not an equality.
no, but the dimension is, it's spanned by the all possible minors of the determinant. So, for example, you have a determinant like this. You could differentiate between these two, or right. So this just means that the rank of this space is just, I mean, something like 2 power 2d. Now we are actually fighting 2 power 2d versus 2 power d. So this says that the number of terms that you need to have, the number of such L1 through LD you need to have in order to get the determinant is like 2 power d, which gives an exponential law. And this was the result of Nissan and Wigderson. And now let me also mention this. There was another polynomial that we looked at yesterday in Amir's lecture, which was this elementary symmetric polynomial, which was sigma d. What was this? This was you look at all subsets of the n variables of size exactly d, and you just look at product of I in S of xi. So it's the sum of all multilinear monomials of degree d. And Amir also showed that there is a depth-3 circuit that computes sigma d efficiently. And it was something of the form some alpha I into, so let's say I going from 1 through maybe d plus 1. No, 1 through n plus 1. Or something like beta I plus something that looked like beta I times x1 plus alpha 1 so it was an expression something that looked like this. Okay, so this is an example of a depth 3 circuit, but I just want to point out that you are trying to compute a polynomial of degree d, whereas this is a depth 3 circuit of degree n, because every intermediate computation has degree n. Now you could ask, there when we are looking at homogeneous depth 3 circuits, suppose I restrict all your computations to only have degree d and not degree n, then do you think, can sigma d be computed in such models at all? Now, because Nissan Wigderson said, okay, let's look at sigma, let's look at mu to be equal to the rank of all the kth order partial derivatives, let's just apply that here. And let's look at what this matrix will look like. So once again, any kth order partial derivative can be identified with a set S. These are the set of variables that you're going to differentiate with. And so every time I differentiate sigma d, every monomial here is going to be multilinear. And every multilinear monomial I can identify with another set T. When will this entry be 1? It will either be 1 or 0 from this, that's clear. When will the entry be 1? It will be 1 precisely when S and T are disjoint. Right? So this guy is 1 if and only if S intersection T is empty. And this is an extremely well studied matrix, and it's called the disjointness matrix. And it says that the rank is full rank. Okay, there's a result that says that this matrix has full rank. So just to get parameters right, so how many rows are there? So the rank of m sigma d, this is going to be, okay, how many rows are there? These are all monomials of degree k over n variables. So this is the min of either n choose k, and the number of guys are going to be monomials of size d minus k over n variables, comma n choose d minus k. So it just says that the rank of this matrix is the smaller of the two dimensions, the rows or the columns. And again, if you choose k to be equal to d over 2, you get essentially the same sort of bound. Okay, you're going to get an exponential lower bound. So this says something very strong in the sense that here is an example of a non-homogeneous circuit. Think of d as being something like n over 2, for example. It's non-homogeneous in the sense that you're computing a degree d polynomial, but intermediate computations are just a factor 2 away from what you need. If that is allowed, you have a really efficient circuit that computes this polynomial. But if you insist on homogeneity, Nissan and Wigderson's lower bound says that you require exponential size. Okay, and just to remind you, the depth reduction to depth 3 that Ankit spoke about, the resulting depth 3 circuit was heavily non-homogeneous, because the intermediate computations, the degree went as large as n to the square root d, which is huge. And in some sense, non-homogeneity is necessary. You have to look at non-homogeneous depth 3 if you want. Okay, so this is the vanilla partial derivative method, where it's just a question of you want to look at the set of partial derivatives, you choose a right threshold and you play around with these binomial coefficients, and that gives the lower bound. So these are just two illustrations of this technique. So are there any questions so far?
The upper bound for the symmetric polynomials, not for depth 3.
Uh-huh.
So is it homogeneous?
So the homogeneous formula, I think the best that we know of for a d symmetric polynomial, it's a formula of size d power log d times poly n. So the size of the best homogeneous formula we know for the elementary symmetric polynomial, the sigma d, is so let's say size formula of sigma d.
Formula can be of depth 3.
No, it's arbitrary depth. The depth is arbitrary. So I think the best that is known is something that is like d power order log d times poly n. And this is a result of, I think, Hrubs and, I think it's explicitly mentioned in Hrubs and Yehudeyov. And it's basically using the Newton identities. And so in particular, this means that if d was very small, think of d as say log n by log n. This is a polynomial sized formula. But
My question was about homogeneous.
yeah, this is homogeneous. The formula that Hroobs and Yehudiev construct is a homogeneous formula. Yeah. Non-homogeneous, this is the best. And yeah.
It's actually better to go to IO then.
Oh, right. Yeah. This is okay. This is a pretty good non-homogeneous formula. Yeah. Okay, so I have 5 more minutes, so let me just describe a different partial derivative method, which for a different sort of model, and I think this technique is very important, and in the next lecture we'll look at more elaborate forms of this technique. And this is again a model that Ankit was looking at last time. So it's expressions that can be written as sums of products of univariates. So this is again something that came up in Ankit's thing. So it's like fi1 of x1, fin of xn. Okay, so it's an expression of this form. And again, I want to come up with an explicit polynomial, and I want to say that any expression of this form must have s which is very large. Okay, and again, the building blocks are these. And so I want to construct a measure that works for this. Now this, so here is a different partial derivative method which was introduced by Nissan in a different context, but this is a very simple expression that illustrates the power of this, and it's also something that you are familiar with because of yesterday's talk. It's going to be so it's this big matrix. Okay, so just to give some intuition about this measure before I go about, so let's just say I want to understand, so let's look at bivariate. Let's say there are just 2 variables, and we're looking at a multilinear polynomial and just 2 variables. And I want to distinguish between these 2 cases. Either the multivariate polynomial factorizes as a linear polynomial in x and a linear polynomial in y, or it doesn't. And I want to differentiate the 2. Okay, this is a sort of a beefed up version of the same thing. You want to say I have a polynomial, I want to figure out whether it factorizes into univariates or not, and I want to somehow distinguish the 2. So let's look at some examples. So let's say, suppose I have something that looks like ax plus a prime times by plus b prime. What sort of coefficients do I get? I get ab of xy plus ab prime x plus a prime by plus a prime b prime. Okay, so if you stare at it, if I write down this matrix which has ab prime, a prime b, a prime b prime, what am I doing? I'm thinking of it as x and 1 and y and 1, and the entry here is the coefficient of xy, the entry here is the coefficient of x times 1, and so on. And in this particular case, this matrix has rank 1. Right? So in this particular case, this matrix has rank 1. And this is and again, if a polynomial does not factorize, you can check that this guy will have rank 2. And this is this observation on steroids. And so these guys are going to be monomials in the first half of the variables. And these guys are monomials in xn by 2 plus 1 through xn. And this entry is the coefficient of, if this was m1, that was m2, m1 times m2 in f. That's this matrix. This is called the Nissan's partial derivative matrix. And again, we want to say that for an expression of that sort, this matrix will have small rank. And then, so since I don't have enough time, maybe I'll get to this in the next this thing, but let me just point out that so claim. Oh, great, fantastic. It's like suddenly finding some note in your pocket. Okay, so here is the claim that I want to show. I want to say that if f equals f1 of x1 times fn of xn, then I'm abusing notation and just calling it mf again, has rank at most 1. Okay? It's not a hard claim to prove, but I will do it. But let's just quickly realize that, once we have this, how does one construct an explicit polynomial? Let's just say I have this matrix, I want this matrix to have large rank. Let's do the easiest thing, we'll just make sure that this matrix is actually the identity matrix. And so if f equals product of xi xn by 2 plus I plus 1, where I goes from 1 through n by 2, you can easily check that this is full rank. To make it easier, let's just say this is xi yi. And so whenever you see a monomial in x, it has to be accompanied by the same monomial in the y variables. So this matrix will just turn out to be the identity matrix. So that is an example of a polynomial which, whenever we try to write it as sums of products of univariates, it will require very, very large summands here. Okay? Okay, now let's just prove the claim. So the claim is in fact exactly, again, this a beefed up version of this. So I have f, which is f1 of x1 times fn by 2 of xn by 2. And just to make life simpler, let me just call this g1 of y1 and 3gn by 2 of yn by 2. I'm just relabeling the variables and the polynomials that are there. Now I want to understand is there a different way in which I can look at the same matrix? So let's multiply all these polynomials together. Okay? And we'll write this down as a huge coefficient vector. So this is like the set of all monomials in the x variables. Okay? And similarly, we'll take all these guys and I'm going to maybe I should have written this. I'm going to list down the coefficients and I'm going to list the coefficients here. And it's easy to check that the matrix MF that you have is just the product of these two guys. I mean, basically, what is the coefficient of x bar e times y bar e prime? It's this entry times this entry. And that's precisely this matrix. And this is just a rank 1 decomposition of that matrix. And so therefore, this is just a proof to say that whenever I have a polynomial of this form, the rank is at most 1. And that's it. So, okay. And there's a slightly more general statement that one can write down, and this would be seen more in Michael's talk, maybe in the PIT thing. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But let me just state it anyway, and without proof. So we saw what branching programs were. Branching programs were you have a matrix A1 of x1, sorry. You have a bunch of matrices A1 through AD, where every entry here is a linear polynomial in the variables. And you finally look at, say, the 1/1th entry of this matrix or something. So this was a branching program that we were looking at. here's a very restricted form of branching program where let's say the first matrix are linear functions in variable x1, and the second matrix is a linear function in the variable x2, and let's say the nth matrix is a in a variable xn. Okay, so this is a very restricted form of branching program where you're first reading x1 and then reading x2 and then doing something. And so these are a simpler form of what are called read once oblivious branching, algebraic branching programs. Okay, so we might see this in Michael's thing, but we'll definitely see talks on this in the main workshop about this model, where it'll in fact be general, where AI could involve univariates and stuff like that, and so on. But here is a claim which just follows in exactly the same thing. Line if the each AI is an W times W matrix, that is, this is a width W branching program, then the partial derivative matrix where these were x1 through xn by 2, look at monomials here, the monomials in the remaining variables, then this has rank at most W. So this is a slightly more general statement, and this is a very, very specific instance of it where the branching program looks like you look, maybe you look at f11, f21, fs1, I mean these are all of x1, and then you multiply these with f1n of xn, fnn of xn. So you multiply these together and just add up all the diagonals. So that's like you're multiplying by the all ones matrix and the all ones matrix here. So this is a very, very specific instance of such a read once branching program. And Nissan's lower bound will in fact tell you that whenever you have a read once branching program of width at most W, the partial derivative matrix is already a good measure to look at when you want to prove lower bounds for such models. Okay. So what we are going to do in the next hour is like we'll take this measure and try to prove lower bounds for multilinear models. And just want to point out that this must seem fishy, because if I replace this polynomial by xi plus yi, just notice that the matrix will still be a permutation matrix. Okay, and this is an example of a multilinear. This is a multilinear polynomial, but it has very large rank. So does that mean that this measure is not useful for proving lower bounds for multilinear formulas? And what Raz observed is that if you take this thing, this measure was very dependent on what were the variables you choose for the rows and what were the variables you chose for the columns. And this polynomial is bad if you chose xi's for the rows and yi's for the columns. But if you mix things around, then this, I mean, if you are very bad with your choice, or rather very good with your choices, you will end up getting a product of polynomials in these variables and a product of polynomials in these variables, and the same trick will just work. So we'll see this in more detail. We'll sort of see as to how for multilinear formulas we can use the same partial derivative technique under a random partition, and that will give us enough leverage to separate what it is for a small multilinear formula, whereas what it is for a generic hard polynomial. And we won't see too much of the details, but hopefully should be enough to convince you that this should give a lower bound for such multilinear formulas. Okay, so maybe this is